Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. This was not Bai Xiaochun's first time hearing about Devil Penitentiary. Early on, the chief of the Bai clan had threatened to have him thrown in that very prison, which had sparked Bai Xiaochun's curiosity. Afterward, he had asked Zhou Yixing for some information about the place, and had learned that Devil Penitentiary was a prison in Giant Ghost City. It was a very famous place, with all sorts of dangerous prisoners locked up inside. They were all evil villains who, for various reasons, had not been put to death. Instead, their cultivation bases had been sealed, and they had been imprisoned. In any case, they were all the type of people that no one would ever want to run into on the outside. Furthermore, there was a saying in Giant Ghost City: "Death isn't frightening. Get locked up in Devil Penitentiary, and you'll wish you were dead. How could an illustrious major general like me serve as a lowly prison guard?" Bai Xiaochun thought angrily. However, he knew that a true leader should be flexible. Plus, if he pulled off the act successfully, he might be able to use this as an opportunity to get access to the teleportation portal and get home. Before he could even say anything, Duke Deathcrier was gone, and Li Shu and his subordinates straightened up from their bows. Li Shu was the type of person who looked threatening without being angry. After coldly looking Bai Xiaochun up and down, he said, "So you're Bai Hao from the Bai clan?" From the cold tone of his voice, he didn't seem too pleased to see Bai Hao standing there, and it was the same with the other two men. After all, they had all heard stories about him recently. They knew that he was vicious and cruel, the type of person who didn't care about family, and could hide his intentions easily. He had even killed numerous members of his own clan. A ferocious person like that was not the type that people would like to get close to. Of course, at the same time, no one would want to offend him either. "You can't act the way you did back in your clan. Now that you're here, you have to live by my rules. In Devil Penitentiary, I'm in charge. The prison isn't open at the moment, so come back tomorrow at this same time." Without even waiting for a response, Li Shu waved his sleeve, causing the whirlpool to reappear in the black waters of the moat. Deep at the bottom of the whirlpool was a cave that Li Shu immediately entered, followed by his two subordinates. Then the whirlpool vanished. Gone, just like that? Bai Xiaochun thought, eyes widening. Obviously, they were trying to impress him with the fact that it wasn't easy to get into Devil Penitentiary. The message was clear: from now on, stick your tail between your legs and behave. "What kind of a crappy place is this prison anyway?" he muttered angrily. "I'm definitely not going in there." After all, he was a major general, and although he had originally forced himself to go along with the idea of working as a prison guard, that changed when people tried to threaten him. Having reached this point in his train of thought, he snorted coldly and walked away. It was currently noontime. Giant Ghost City was a huge place, and the outer city seemed to go on and on without end. People were everywhere, including soul cultivators, necromancers, and even a lot of savage giants. This was one of the 5 major cities of the Wildlands, a place which kept watch over a huge area, and was filled with plentiful resources. Just about everything one could imagine was available for purchase, and the streets were packed and loud no matter where one went. Occasionally, patrols of city guards would fly overhead. However, it was rare to see anyone else flying around. Other than the city guards, the only people allowed to fly were devas. Still prickling with anger, Bai Xiaochun strolled around and tried to find out where the teleportation portal was. As it turned out, it was no secret, and he was soon heading in that very direction. "I guess I'll just have to do without that extra diva soul. Once I get back to the Great Wall, I'll figure out what to do about the situation." Giant Ghost City's teleportation portal was located in the northern part of the city, in the middle of a huge public square. It was an enormous gate made of glowing light, with a constant flow of soul cultivators, necromancers, and savages going in and out. By the time Bai Xiaochun got there, it was already evening. After sizing the place up, he noticed that there were city guards in charge of the place. However, Bai Xiaochun had seen a lot of city guards already, and wasn't worried about them. As he neared, his eyes began to glitter. This teleportation portal represented his ticket back to the Great Wall. Although it wouldn't take him directly there, he would at least get close. Considering the level of his cultivation base, making it back from that location shouldn't be difficult. His heart was already pounding with excitement, and yet, he couldn't help but worry about something he had learned while in the Bai clan. Supposedly, the teleportation portal would check your identity strictly before allowing you to use it. Ever since Zhou Yixing had told him that, he had begun to wonder how the process worked. Therefore, he stopped some distance away from the portal itself and looked around the area more closely. Almost immediately, his expression flickered as he noticed that every single soul cultivator who entered the teleportation portal would be touched by flickering ripples. After studying the ripples for a short time, he realized how they worked. Clearly, they represented some magical technique that assessed a person's identity. With my mask, I shouldn't have any problems, right? After some hesitation, he looked up into the evening sky and then gritted his teeth. I might as well give it a shot. Making sure to breathe calmly, he walked toward the teleportation portal. None of the guards paid any attention to him, and after paying the requisite soul medicine tax, he was given access. Those few short steps were ones of incredible anxiety. Then, he found himself standing in front of the shining light, his eyes alive with anticipation. It's definitely going to work, and then, I'll fly off into the sunset. Taking a breath, he stepped forward, putting him in contact with the light. However, as soon as he made contact, his heart leapt as a strange, prickly sensation spread across him. It was almost as if some spirit automaton were examining him. Rumbling sounds echoed out from the teleportation portal, and the fluctuations entered him, seemingly intent on scouring his soul. It was a soul search to confirm his identity. Thankfully, his mask quickly went to work to conceal his true identity. However, the power levels involved surpassed imagination, and Bai Xiaochun could tell immediately that the mask would only be able to hold out for a brief moment under such intense scrutiny. If he didn't pass this test and allow the soul search to confirm his identity, he wouldn't be able to teleport away, and would also be revealed as an imposter. In the moment of time that the mask bought him, he stepped backward, away from the teleportation portal. As he did, quite a few people noticed, and strange expressions appeared on their faces. Seeing so many eyes on him, his heart trembled nervously. Raising his voice, he said, forget it. I'm not going anywhere. Giant Ghost City is the best place to earn a name. With that, he walked away. People continued to look at him curiously until he melted into the crowd and vanished. Some distance away, he hurried along, ashen-faced and heart-pounding. What do I do? He wailed inwardly. If I can't use the teleportation portal, how will I get home? He wanted to cry, but no tears would come. All of his hopes had been wrapped up in the teleportation portal, and yet now, he knew he couldn't use it. A bit later, he blinked a few times and then sighed at how bitter his life had become. Feeling completely crestfallen, he found a random inn to stay the night. The next day, he walked out of the inn bleary-eyed. If I can't get back, I guess I just need to rise to prominence here. Perhaps that's just my lot in life. How completely annoying for a low-profile kind of person like myself. Sighing helplessly the entire way, he headed back toward the moat. Now that he thought about it, being a guard at Devil Penitentiary might not be that bad after all. With that status, he would be temporarily safe from the Bai clan, which was a good thing. He got to the moat early, whereupon he sat down cross-legged and frowned his way until evening. At that point, the whirlpool sprang up again, and one of Li Shu's subordinates appeared. When he saw Bai Xiaochun, he gave him an expressionless nod. All right, come with me, he said. Without another word, he turned and headed back toward the whirlpool. Bai Xiaochun couldn't stop sighing in his heart about how humiliating it was for a spectacular major general like himself to be in this situation. However, considering the circumstances, he knew that he simply had to come to terms with it. Whatever. Considering that I, Bai Xiaochun, am so outstanding and awesome, it doesn't matter where I end up, I always earn a new level of respect. As he tried to pump himself up, he looked at the man who had just stepped out of the whirlpool. By this point, he realized that Li Shu must be the leader of Devil Penitentiary, and also his own future superior. Furthermore, this man here must be an assistant of some sort to Li Shu. Get moving, the man said, otherwise you'll have to wait outside for another day. Bai Xiaochun already didn't like this guy. I didn't do anything to offend him, he complained inwardly. However, there was no other option for him than to bow his head and hurry into the whirlpool. They disappeared, and began to sink down toward the bottom of the moat. Considering that this man was Li Shu's assistant, it was no surprise that he had an extraordinary cultivation base. He also had a command medallion that emanated a soft light, protecting both himself and Bai Xiaochun from the deadly black moat water around them. Bai Xiaochun was a bit nervous as he looked out at the inky blackness. Not only could he not see anything, but he felt a sensation of profound danger just looking at the black water, as if terrifying beasts lurked within it. He kept his guard up as they pierced their way downward. Eventually, he realized that he could see two green points of light up ahead in the black water. They seemed to pulse with a netherworldly aura, and almost looked like eyes. Merely looking at them caused his hair to stand on end. However, the man escorting him didn't seem to have any reaction whatsoever, so Bai Xiaochun merely followed along, maintaining full vigilance. As they proceeded forward, the two green lights grew larger and larger. The closer they got, the clearer things became, until Bai Xiaochun's heart leapt. There at the bottom of the moat was an enormous stone statue. The statue depicted a gigantic Xuanwu turtle that pulsed with spatial distortions. The two green lights that Bai Xiaochun had spotted earlier were actually the turtle's eyes. It also seethed with a profoundly murderous aura that seemed to be contained in the area with magical seals. Were it not for those sealing marks, the aura would have seeped out and caused drastic transformations in heaven and earth. Bai Xiaochun was already shaken, but then he realized that, for some reason, the turtle actually looked familiar. After studying it closely for another moment, his eyes went as wide as saucers, and his heart began to pound in his chest. That statue looks a lot like the little turtle. The little turtle had been missing for a long time now. Bai Xiaochun had searched his bag of holding thoroughly on a few occasions looking for him, but couldn't find him. Even still, Bai Xiaochun had the feeling that he was there inside, somewhere. Even as Bai Xiaochun hesitated about what it all meant, the man led him toward the turtle statue's left eye. Nervous about everything, Bai Xiaochun followed along, and soon they entered the eye itself. A diaphanous barrier kept the black water out, which the man's command medallion allowed them to pass through. Bai Xiaochun soon found himself in a large stone cavern filled with criss-crossed stalactites and stalagmites that looked almost like vicious fangs. There were 4 soul cultivators waiting there, who clasped hands and bowed deeply as soon as they saw the man leading Bai Xiaochun. "Greetings, left Dharma protector." Their voices weren't loud and booming, but rather, bone-chillingly cold. They seemed like people who lived on the border between life and death, whose mere gazes could pierce to the heart. After looking at them for a moment, Bai Xiaochun determined that all 4 were nascent soul cultivators. This devil penitentiary isn't some ordinary prison, he thought. As he continued to look around, he noticed 4 tunnels leading off in 4 directions, with a 5th tunnel-like opening in the ceiling. Sun Peng, this is one of the new guards the warden just assigned to cell block D. You arrange everything for him. After issuing his orders, the man clasped his hands behind his back and flew up into the 5th tunnel overhead. The group of 4 soul cultivators clasped hands to him as he left, then dispersed into the 4 corridors, with the exception of an old man. Frowning, he looked at Bai Xiaochun and said, "If Li Shu personally handed you over to the left Dharma protector to arrange things, then logically speaking, you should have been assigned to cell block A, not my cell block D." The old man seemed to think something was a bit strange about the situation, but still smiled at Bai Xiaochun. Although it was a friendly smile, it looked ghastly to Bai Xiaochun. Coupled with the old man's sinister aura, it caused a chill to run down Bai Xiaochun's back. "May I ask your name, fellow Taoist?" the old man asked. Bai Xiaochun blinked a few times, and then carefully answered, "I'm Bai Hao, Bai Hao, Bai Hao, Bai." After thinking for a moment, the man's eyes went wide. "Bai Hao from the Bai clan?" Pleased at the man's reaction, Bai Xiaochun proudly said, "Yeah, that's right. I'm none other than Bai Hao from the Bai clan." The old man sucked in a breath. Now he understood why Li Shu had assigned this person to cell block D. "Well, aren't you a hot potato?" he thought. The fact that Li Shu handed you off to the left Dharma protector means that the original orders came from higher up. And the only person with a status high enough to give orders like that would be Duke Deathcrier. And the only person who can order Duke Deathcrier around is the Heavenly King himself. The Bai clan has a bounty on this kid's head, but the Heavenly King sent him here. The old man didn't dare to ponder the matter any more deeply. Sighing, he realized that he couldn't afford to offend this newcomer. After all, according to the rumors, he had reviled his own clan, and even gone so far as to kidnap his own father. Not only did he have profound levels of patience, but he was completely and utterly vicious. "Welcome to cell block D of Devil Penitentiary, fellow Taoist Bai Hao. Come, let me show you around." Forcing a smile onto his face, he led Bai Xiaochun toward the northernmost of the 4 tunnels. Although Devil Penitentiary exists inside of a stone turtle statue, it's actually very large inside. 5 unique dimensions exist here, namely cell blocks A, B, C, D, and the Supermax cell block. The Supermax cell block is run by the Exalted Warden himself, and is the core of Devil Penitentiary. Normally, no one ever gets inside without being summoned. As far as the other cell blocks go, the prisoners get locked up in them depending on how important or dangerous they are. The most important prisoners go to cell block A. All of the prisoners here are dangerous and vicious people, but the prisoners in cell block D are almost like children compared to the others. Every cell block has a group of roughly 100 guards, with 10 captains and a deputy warden. I'm the deputy warden of cell block D. Of course, Warden Li Shu is in charge of the 4 deputy wardens. Sun Peng led him directly to cell block D and began to show him around. He had already decided that since Bai Hao had been delivered to him, and he couldn't get rid of him, that he might as well treat him well. After all, with so many people in cell block D, having an extra guard around wouldn't hurt anything. Of course, he wouldn't go beyond what was necessary. Eventually, Sun Peng led Bai Xiaochun to an area in the middle of the cell block D part of the prison, a sprawling square, in the middle of which was a glowing door. The door emanated intense pressure and occasional rumbling sounds. Surrounding it were 10 areas that Sun Peng explained were the barracks where the 10 teams of guards resided. As for the glowing door, it was the actual entrance to the cell block. The 10 barracks all looked exactly the same, constructed from green limestone, but decorated in colorful fashion. However, perhaps because they were located in the middle of Devil Penitentiary, Bai Xiaochun found them particularly sinister. Still depressed over the matter of the teleportation portal, Bai Xiaochun sighed and thought to himself, I can't believe I'm actually becoming a prison guard. Sun Peng assigned Bai Xiaochun to Squad 9. Then, just like Duke Deathcrier and Li Shu, he hurried away. The captain of Squad 9 didn't see Deputy Warden Sun Peng very often, but considering that the man was his direct superior, he quickly picked up on the unspoken hints he had given regarding Bai Xiaochun's status. The captain was a burly man who appeared to be about 40 years of age. He almost immediately recognized this fair young man as the recently famous Bai clan rebel, and realized he needed to pay special attention to him. In fact, he even transmitted orders to the guards under his command, explaining who Bai Xiaochun was. Bai Xiaochun could see how the captain and the other guards of Squad 9 reacted when he smilingly told them his name. They sized him up, and although they weren't extremely cold, they were by no means warm and welcoming. Bai Hao had been a popular topic of conversation recently, and therefore, all of them had at least some impression of him. They knew that he was a vicious fellow who had reviled his clan, and was the type who shouldn't be provoked. After seeing him in person, though, he didn't seem to match up to the rumors. Before Bai Xiaochun's arrival, Squad 9 had consisted of a total of 11 people, 10 guards and the captain. But now there were 12. There were no women, only men, and all of the other guards seemed middle-aged, with cultivation bases in core formation. The fact that even such a group of low-ranking guards was so powerful further showed how important Devil Penitentiary was. When Bai Xiaochun realized that the group was not being very welcoming, he felt a bit awkward. To try to smooth things over, the captain quickly assigned him quarters in the barracks. Why don't you rest up a bit, Bai Hao? He said. The truth is that we aren't very busy here in Devil Penitentiary. The squad doesn't really know much about you now, but there will be plenty of time later for you all to get to know each other. With that, he left. As far as he was concerned, the situation wasn't very complicated. When dealing with a fiendish killer that you couldn't get rid of, the best thing was to try to get along with him, but not get too close. One just had to be careful not to treat him too coldly. Bai Xiaochun already had a good impression of the captain. At the least, he was better than Duke Deathcrier or Li Shu. His quarters weren't very large, and contained only a bed and a chair. It was a simple room, but it had a remarkable spell formation that was connected to the stone turtle statue, giving it exceptional defensive capabilities. After looking around, he sat down cross-legged and frowned. How cruel the twists of fate. Here I am, a prison guard. The events of the past 2 days had been quite complicated. The Bai clan patriarch had attacked, then Duke Deathcrier showed up. After that, the teleportation portal plan failed, and now he was a prison guard. Whatever. If I may guard, I may guard. The most important thing now is to keep myself safe. Plus, I need to get on the good side of my squad. If I can get them to like me, they'll probably be a lot of help to me later. I still don't know why the giant Ghost King saved me, but at least I'm in a pretty safe situation, at least for the moment. How long will that last though? He sighed, and eventually his thoughts turned to Diva Souls, whereupon he gritted his teeth angrily. It's all the fault of that granny red dust. And Shen Hichan. Well, whatever. Might as well forget about the teleportation portal. The best thing to do is increase my cultivation base and figure out another way to get back to the Great Wall. I already have 4 Diva Soul clones. All I have to do now is get a metal-type Diva Soul, and I can step into the Heaven Dao Nascent Soul stage. When all was said and done, Bai Xiaochun felt very nervous. It was like he was walking along the edge of a cliff. The slightest misstep could lead him to a disastrous fall. However, there was nothing he could do about the situation. The teleportation portal wasn't an option, and therefore, unless he simply gave up on the heaven-down nascent soul idea, that meant he only had a bit over 1,000 years before he ran out of longevity. Then, his dream of living forever would be impossible to realize. If he wanted to live forever, then he had to walk along that cliff. If he wanted to get home, he simply had to grit his teeth and keep going. Actually, up to this point in his life, his cultivation had always gone quite smoothly, whether it was in the Spirit Stream sect, the River-defying sect, the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, or the Great Wall. It was only after entering that sepulchre in the wildlands that he finally experienced the feeling of being stuck in place, with the shadow of death looming larger behind him. Once I get that metal-type diva soul, I'm never going to risk my life like this again. He was actually so worried about the situation that he almost felt like crying. There was almost nothing in the world he wanted more right now than a diva soul. Where am I supposed to get that diva soul from? Plus, it has to be a metal-type diva soul. The giant ghost king is a demigod expert, so he probably has one. But, how would I get my hands on it? He clenched his hands into fists and thought as hard as he could, but couldn't come up with any ideas. Although I know a bit about Giant Ghost City, I definitely don't know enough. Whether it's news about diva souls or the details of why Giant Ghost King saved me, I need more information. Eyes flashing, he took out a jade slip to send messages to Zhou Yixing and Li Feng. The first thing he said was that they didn't need to wait for him in the appointed location any longer, and could just return to Giant Ghost City. Second, he asked Li Feng to give him some more details about Giant Ghost City. It didn't take long before Li Feng sent back a wealth of detailed information. As soon as Bai Xiaochun saw it, his eyes went wide, and his heart began to pound. 5 devas. The most powerful person in Giant Ghost City was the demigod Heavenly King. Beneath him were 5 dukes and 10 marquises. The dukes were all devas, and the marquises were all half a step into the diva realm. Of the 5 devas, 3 were the patriarchs of the 3 great clans. The other 2 were Duke Deathcrier and Duke Netherworld. In terms of the 10 marquises, they led the 10 armies that were garrisoned in Giant Ghost City, and were people with close connections to the royal throne. Each and every one of them was a very important person. Bai Xiaochun also learned that although the patriarchs of the 3 great clans were technically subordinates of the Giant Ghost King, they had formed their own separate faction. In the end, the Giant Ghost King is a demigod expert, so he could kill them all with the wave of a hand. In Bai Xiaochun's opinion, there seemed to be something fishy about the whole situation. However, Li Feng couldn't provide any further details. These were just the things he had heard about here and there. Maybe the Giant Ghost King saved me because he wanted to test out the Bai clan's attitude? But why would he need to do that? He's a demigod, after all. No matter how he analyzed the situation, it only seemed to lead to more questions. It was a complicated state of affairs, and he simply had too little information, which made it hard to make a good assessment. However, from what he could tell, the 3 great clans must have some trump card that enabled them to maintain a somewhat antagonistic relationship with the Giant Ghost King. Most likely, the Giant Ghost King wasn't very happy about the arrangement. That's probably the gist of things, at least. As long as the Giant Ghost King isn't too happy about being on equal footing with the 3 clans, then I'm probably safe here in Giant Ghost City. So, what I need to do now is get that metal-type diva soul as quickly as possible, before things get dicey. Then I can just run away. Frowning at his lot in life, he took a deep breath to focus, then closed his eyes to start his auguries regarding 13-colored flame. The formula for 13-fold flame was completely different from that of 12-colored flame. It even had different requirements in terms of divine sense, requirements that he would never have been able to meet before acquiring the diva soul from the Bai clan. But now he had a 4th clone, which boosted his divine sense even more. With that, he was confident of being able to use Bai Hao's research notes to eventually succeed with 13-colored flame. In fact, he suspected he might even get so far as 14-colored flame. As he was wrapped up in performing auguries and seeking enlightenment, the night passed uneventfully. Although it was impossible to see the sun or moon from Devil Penitentiary, because of the spell formation which protected it, the phases of night and day were as normal. When night gave way to day on the outside, Bai Xiaochun was still in the middle of his work, and didn't even notice. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During those 3 days, no one bothered him. Around dawn on the 4th day, he opened his eyes when a voice reached his ears from outside his room. Bai Hao, Squad 9 is on patrol duty today. Everyone is waiting for you. It was the voice of the captain, and it sounded very serious. Since this is your first time going out on patrol, it will be a good chance for you to see what kind of prisoners we keep in cell block D. Prisoners. Bai Xiaochun got nervously to his feet and walked out of his room. The captain was waiting there outside, a smile on his face. Bai Xiaochun knew that he needed to develop a good relationship with the squad, but that wasn't very difficult. He just needed to stop thinking about how he was a core formation expert with 4 diva soul clones, and that he could even kill lofty nascent soul cultivators. He just needed to act like an unimportant person. Therefore, he put a look of both respect and cheer on his face as he clasped hands and bowed, then said, "Captain, you really didn't need to come in person. If you have orders for me, just send a message." Actually, Bai Xiaochun already liked the captain to begin with, so it was easy to give him a particularly deep bow. The captain seemed a bit surprised. The truth was that he had no other choice than to come get Bai Xiaochun. According to the rules of Devil Penitentiary, all guards had to participate in patrol duty. If Bai Xiaochun knew about that and chose not to join, then he would be to blame. But if the captain didn't personally notify him, then he would be held responsible. The other guards might be keeping their distance, but when the captain thought about all the rumors he'd heard, he really felt he had no other choice. However, to his surprise, the reportedly vicious, family-killing fiend who had turned traitor against his clan and kidnapped his own father, Bai Hao, was actually being very polite. The captain laughed heartily. "Oh, no problem at all. You're part of Squad 9 now, and since you just arrived, how could I not come to give you the news personally? Listen, Bai Hao, to people on the outside, everything about Devil Penitentiary is a big secret. After all, only 2 types of people can actually go into the cell block, the prisoners and us guards." Although he didn't yet have a very good impression of Bai Xiaochun, the captain seemed a bit more sincere than before, and he even began to explain more information as they walked along. After following the captain for a bit, Bai Xiaochun couldn't help but ask, "Captain, what kind of cultivation bases do all the prisoners have?" "It doesn't matter," the captain replied proudly. "Everyone who comes to Devil Penitentiary has to submit. Even dragons." Before long, they were approaching the huge glowing door in the middle of the square. Bai Xiaochun's curiosity was growing. He had experienced a lot of things in his life, but had never been inside of a prison. The idea of descending into the depths of Devil Penitentiary had him filled with anticipation. The other soul cultivators who were part of Squad 9 were all waiting impatiently by the doorway, and many of them seemed to get even more irritated when they saw Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun could see that, and considering that he had no idea how long he would be serving as a guard, he hurried forward and said, "Hello, brothers. I'm new here and don't know the rules. I'm terribly sorry for keeping all of you waiting." Currently, he looked like Bai Hao, young, pure and fair, even delicate. Furthermore, he spoke in a very pleasing fashion. Almost immediately, some of the irritation in the eyes of the other guards faded. After all, Bai Hao's reputation was that of a vicious beast. But here he was politely and passionately offering an explanation and apology. The other guards were surprised, and weren't quite sure what to say. In any case, Bai Xiaochun's smiling face made it hard for them to stay angry. Beyond that, the way he rushed forward and treated them all like older brothers caused strange feelings to rise up in their hearts. Almost immediately, the coldness that many of them felt toward him began to fade. The only exception was one long-faced young man who responded with a cold snort. Apparently, he had a rather high standing in Squad 9. When the other guards saw his reaction, their expressions went back to being icy. Bai Xiaochun was not very happy about that. "I never offended this guy," he thought. The captain pretended not to notice what had happened. Laughing, he said, "All right, everyone's here, let's head in." Swishing his sleeve, he produced a command medallion, which he extended toward the glowing door. Almost immediately, a rift opened up in the middle of it. The captain went in first, and everyone else followed behind, with Bai Xiaochun taking up the final spot. As soon as he entered the light, a feeling like that of teleportation swept through him. It was like heaven and earth crushing down on him, and was a very unpleasant sensation. However, it only lasted for a moment before fading away. Then, Bai Xiaochun's vision cleared, and he found himself looking at a very peculiar dimension. There was no sky or land, only a black void. Hanging down from the vast, seemingly never-ending darkness above were countless chains made of bones. Hanging at the end of the bone chains were enormous skulls, each one several dozens of meters tall. They were vicious-looking things that had clearly been hanging there in this void for tens upon tens of thousands of years. They seemed to be arranged in some sort of pattern, almost as if to form some enormous, densely packed spell formation. Of course, none of them were located too close to any of the others. Those skulls were the prison cells. In terms of color, they weren't white. In fact, they seemed to be constantly flickering with random colors, almost as if there were some type of magic at work inside of them. In addition, it was possible to hear the occasional bitter scream coming from inside. Those screams came from the prisoners. The prisoners in the skulls all wore ragged clothing, and some of them were even naked. There were men and women, and even the occasional savage giant, forced to shrink down in size to fit in the skull cages. Quite a few were soul cultivators, and there were also necromancers present. All of them were gaunt and emaciated, and yet, each and every one burst with a murderous aura and an air of brutality. In addition to the prisoners in the skull cages, there were also soul cultivators roaming around in grey robes, their hands and legs in shackles. They were also prisoners, but weren't dangerous enough to keep in cages, and were free to roam about among the cells. Quite a few of the prisoners were female, and many of them were extremely beautiful. When the grey-robed soul cultivator prisoners saw the guards of Squad 9, they rushed over, trembling, to kowtow. Flattering, fawning expressions could be seen on their faces, and as for the beautiful female prisoners, they made sure to reveal their ample cleavage as they bent over. When Bai Xiaochun saw that, he was quite shocked. At this point, the captain bellowed, "All right, we'll be on patrol for 3 days. For the first 6 hours, we'll do things like usual. Go have some fun and don't cause any trouble. When the 6 hours are up, we'll meet at Old Devil Joe's cell. Let's see if we can finally get him to spill the beans." After the captain finished speaking, Bai Xiaochun watched as the smiling guards dispersed in various directions. When that happened, Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide with shock as he saw many of the grey-robed prisoners flocking around the guards as if they were old friends. Some of them even began to massage the guards' shoulders and lean down to whisper things in their ears. Furthermore, even more fawning expressions than before could be seen on the prisoners' faces. When the captain saw how befuddled Bai Xiaochun looked, he smiled, lowered his voice, and said, "Those people are like stewards here in Devil Penitentiary. None of them committed particularly serious crimes, and they tend to behave well. As for how easy or difficult their lives are, that's up to our whim. The prisoners in the skulls are the really important ones." He pointed at one nearby skull, within which was an old man with a red birthmark on his face. He looked particularly ferocious, but currently had his eyes closed, as if he didn't care at all about the world around him. For example, that guy. He pissed off His Highness the King 200 years ago, and has been locked up ever since. He doesn't have any secrets worth extracting, so he'll probably just die of natural causes eventually. Alright, we'll go have some fun. As guards, we're like gods here. The lives of the prisoners are in our hands, and therefore, as long as you don't do anything too excessive, you can pretty much do anything you please. Anything we please? Bai Xiaochun thought incredulously, his mind spinning at how different Devil Penitentiary was than he'd imagined. Even more shocking was how the long-faced youth from moments ago was surrounded by a group of 8 beautiful female prisoners, who were pulling him off into the distance with flirtatious looks on their faces. He couldn't help but blink a few times and even lick his lips when he saw that. His heart actually started to beat as well. After all, there were a couple of female prisoners in that group who he found particularly attractive. Pointing in their direction, he said, "Captain, what exactly are they going off to do?" The captain cleared his throat. "Just keep your eyes to yourself. Don't be such a prude. Oh right, don't forget to leave the prisoners in the cells alone. They're murderers and fiends, every last one of them. Accidents have happened in the past, you know. Their cultivation bases are sealed, but on one occasion, one of them bit off the ear of one of the guards." After giving a few more reminders and warnings, the captain left to enjoy himself. Bai Xiaochun felt like a new world had been opened up to him. After looking around, he realized that quite a few of the grey-robed prisoners were looking over at him. They quickly identified him as a new guard, and hurried over to offer greetings. "Greetings, Exalted One. If you need anything, Exalted One, please just say the word. You're so young, Exalted One. Now that you're a guard in Devil Penitentiary, you have boundless prospects for the future. You're like a dragon among men." As everyone began to fawn over him, Bai Xiaochun noticed several attractive female cultivators giving him the eye. Obviously, they were trying to seduce him. Bai Xiaochun's heart started to pound with the realization that all he needed to do was point his finger, and any of those female cultivators would cater to his every whim. Fudge, this place is evil. Panting, Bai Xiaochun realized that this really wasn't the type of place for him. As he continued to revel in the praise of the prisoners, and the gentle voices of the female cultivators, he continued to stew in anxiety. Who would ever have thought that Devil Penitentiary would be like this? He thought. Bai Xiaochun is a pure person. How could he deign to wallow in a place like this? As he anxiously allowed the prisoners to lead him off into the distance, he came to understand what Devil Penitentiary was really like, that it was the type of place where you could truly say, anything goes. Eventually, Bai Xiaochun realized that he really liked Devil Penitentiary, and that the world really was a wonderful place. But Bai Xiaochun is a clean living and honest person. I definitely won't do anything to violate my conscience. 6 hours later, Bai Xiaochun felt more wonderful than ever about being in Devil Penitentiary. At that point, he followed the directions given him by the helpful prisoners to meet back up with the rest of the squad. The captain was already present, as were 7 or 8 of the other guards. Everyone seemed to be in wonderful moods, and were chatting happily. However, the long-faced young man was also there, and as soon as he saw Bai Xiaochun, his expression turned grim. He held this traitor from the Bai clan in complete contempt. As far as he was concerned, anyone who would kidnap his own father and kill his own fellow clan members was completely perverse, and the type of person who actually deserved to be locked up in Devil Penitentiary. Furthermore, he had been friends with Bai Qi, which deepened his hatred. As for the other guards, they simply pretended not to see Bai Xiaochun. Bai Xiaochun stood there feeling a bit awkward, and starting to get angry. What's the deal with this guy? He thought. What's he picking on me for? With that, he began to assess the young man's cultivation base, which caused the young man to look over at him with icy eyes. The captain could see that tension was building up between the two of them, so he quickly planted himself in the middle and then pointed at a nearby skull. Alright, let's get to business. See that guy, Bai Hao? That's old Devil Joe. The long-faced young man snorted coldly, and Bai Xiaochun suppressed his anger to look in the direction the captain was pointing. Within the huge skull sat a burly man who, despite being seated cross-legged, was still nearly 2 meters tall. From the look of it, if he stood up, he would almost be as tall as one of the savage giants. He was a real brute. His eyes glowed red, and a ferocious-looking smile twisted his lips. Furthermore, he looked at the guards with a greedy expression that almost made it seem like he wanted to eat them. As soon as Bai Xiaochun laid eyes on him, he got the sense that the man was a cannibal of some sort. He had a murderous aura that made him seem completely impervious to reason, the type who would murder people left and right without the slightest compunction. This is old Devil Joe, the captain continued. Not only is he a cold-blooded murderer, but he's addicted to eating children. 100 years ago, he ate so many children it was impossible to count. However, because of his connections to the Kai clan, one of the 3 great clans, he managed to get spared from the death penalty. Bai Xiaochun frowned. He wasn't the type of person who instantly believed everything he heard. However, although the captain's story seemed a bit unbelievable, based on what this old Devil Joe looked like, it seemed possible. But now that he's here, the captain continued icily, he has to live a life of suffering. By this point, all of the rest of the guards had gathered. Alright, let's begin. This is our last chance to get him to talk. The captain waved his sleeve, and Squad 9 headed, grim-faced, toward old Devil Joe's cell. When old Devil Joe saw them coming over, his vicious grin widened, and his eyes glittered. Suddenly, he jumped to his feet, grabbed the eyeholes of the skull, and let out a furious roar. That roar caused everyone to stop in place for a moment. Useless fools. I, Zhou Yunlong, have eaten so many people like you I've lost count. Shut up, barked one of the guards, jumping forward and performing an incantation gesture. Then he waved his finger at the skull, which changed colors. At the same time, the flicker of lightning could be seen inside, causing old Devil Joe to tremble, and then let out an agonized shriek. The guards of Squad 9, looking very fierce and dangerous, went about using all the tricks they could think of. Tell us where the treasure is, spit it out and we won't torment you. But if you don't talk, then don't blame us for what happens. Senior Joe, there's no need to be like this. Now that you're in here, you won't be getting out. None of your assets on the outside will do you any good. Why not just reveal the truth? Then things will go easy for you. In fact, life inside could actually be pretty nice for you. Some of them threatened, some of them cajoled. Every method possible was pulled out to try to get him to reveal the location of whatever treasure it was they were talking about. However, no matter what they did, and no matter how old Devil Joe screamed, the vicious smile never left his face. And in fact, it only grew more vicious. Finally, the long-faced young man strode forward. Laughing coldly, he said, "Not gonna talk, huh? Fine, I'll force it out of you." As soon as the young man walked forward, the other guards started to get excited. Zhao Feng is Squad 9's inquisitor. If you don't talk, then he'll pry your mouth open. That's right. The other 8 squads might not have succeeded, but Zhao Feng can. Even the captain's eyes were glowing with anticipation. As for Bai Xiaochun, he simply watched what was happening. Although he wasn't sure what an inquisitor was, he had the feeling that the long-faced young man must have some higher standing than everyone else. It sounded like Inquisitor was a title or rank of some sort. The long-faced young man walked up to the cell and performed a double-handed incantation gesture, summoning a long black needle. Instantly, the needle shot forward and stabbed into Old Devil Joe, provoking an unprecedentedly ragged scream. A moment later, Old Devil Joe's eyes turned bright red, and yet the arrogance within them didn't fade in the least. Eventually, he stopped screaming, and then started laughing. "That's all you've got? I've eaten tons of Inquisitors like you in the past. Delicious, every last one of them. I wonder what you taste like though." The long-faced young man looked angrily at Old Devil Joe, then went to work on another incantation gesture. However, no matter what he did, Old Devil Joe just kept laughing and laughing. Furious, the other guards did everything they could to help out. Bai Xiaochun stood off to the side, looking on in shock as the guards of Squad 9 interrogated and tormented Old Devil Joe. Nearly a day passed, and although Old Devil Joe was left gasping for breath, he still didn't say a word about his treasure. Damn it, this guy is tight-lipped. Eventually, the guards began to back down, glaring at Old Devil Joe as if they wished they could break into his brain to get the information they wanted. That was especially true of the long-faced young man. When Old Devil Joe was incarcerated recently, the captain explained, he didn't have a thing on him. But he built up quite the treasure trove in his life. He obviously hid it away somewhere. He was in the great circle of the nascent soul stage, half a step into the diva realm. He dominated the world for an entire 60-year cycle and massacred more than 30 entire clans. He definitely has a lot of treasures. After seeing how angry his fellow guards were, Bai Xiaochun hesitated for a moment, and then finally asked, why don't you soul search him? Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.